You can estimate the age of deer using a couple of different techniques. That animal having milk present means that it produced a fawn that likely survived into the fall. The final metric is antler size off of males. Why is harvest data something that you should consider collecting off of all deer that you harvest on your property this fall? I'm Mark Turner, Extension Wildlife Specialist at OSU, and today we're going to be talking about that topic. One of the primary things that we oftentimes encourage hunters and land managers to think about doing during the deer season is collecting deer harvest data. Things like age and weight, lactation status, and antler size of all deer that are harvested on your property this fall. That can be a really important and easy to collect metric that can tell you whether or not your management decisions, such as increasing food availability, maybe planting food plots, prescribed burning, or harvesting more does to hopefully increase the amount of food that's available for every individual on the landscape. All those things should result in changes to that harvest data. The first primary thing that we usually recommend folks take is age. You can estimate the age of deer using a couple of different techniques, one of which is jawbone aging, using tooth replacement and wear. There's also cementum annuli, where you would pull an incisor from that animal and send it off to a lab, and then they would cut it. And similar to how the rings on a tree add rings each year, you can estimate age using cementum annuli off the teeth as well. However, for most landowners, we really just recommend pulling jawbones, and if you pull jawbones off of every deer and you can then age it, it's really easy to assign deer into age classes such as fawns, 1.5-year-old deer, and 2.5-year-old deer and older, just looking at the number of teeth and the number of crests on different teeth. You can also then back off and look at the wear on some of the teeth that are a little further back in the mouth on the molars. And again, that's a little bit less accurate, but it's still a good method to get you some ballpark idea of how old that deer was. Age is a really important metric because we use that to basically stratify the rest of the data. You wouldn't want to compare the weights of the doe fawns to the weights of the older does on your property, for example, because of course those doe fawns are going to be a little bit lighter, or a good bit lighter, than those older does, just because they have a little bit less age to them. So simply by collecting that age, we can then use that to stratify our data. The next thing that we recommend collecting off all deer is body weight. Now, you can do that a couple of different ways. If you like to field dress your animals in the field, you can certainly collect that body weight data after you get it back to the skin and shed. However, if you bring your deer out of the woods live, you can collect that live weight just off of that animal hanging without being gutted. You can use an analog scale. I really like a digital scale just because typically they allow for a little bit more precision in their measurements, and those can be found relatively inexpensively online for $30 or $40. But by collecting weights off all those animals, you should be able to tell if weights are going up by age class and by sex. That tells you that your management program is working. But if you're seeing age and weight data go down, you're going to see some negative effects. And this is why it's important to not just collect harvest data off of males. If you just collect buck harvest data, you probably aren't going to have as much data to be able to tell trends over time. Whereas if you collect off both bucks and does, generally a lot of properties are harvesting more does than bucks. And on those places, that doe data can be really critical to tell you if your management program's working. Speaking of does, another metric that we like to collect is lactation status. By simply seeing if that animal has milk, generally we recommend cutting the udder, although sometimes there will just be milk that's visible by squeezing the udder. But in either scenario, that animal having milk present means that it produced a fawn that likely survived into the fall. And that's an important thing to tell you because, again, fawn recruitment is something that you want to track over time to see whether or not animals are having fawns, because that can tell you whether they're in poor nutrition if they're not having fawns, or perhaps you don't have very good fawning cover and those fawns are getting eaten by coyotes and bobcats or other predators relatively early on in the fawning season. So tracking the percentage of does each year that lactate, that can be a really important metric. And then the final metric that I also like collecting is antler size off of males. Really, the best metric to collect would be collecting the actual gross Boone and Crockett score. So that's collected including measurements of spread, main beam length, width, and point length. But again, there are other measures if you just simply want to collect, say, the number of points, the animal spread, as well as the main beam length. That's going to be better than nothing, and that's certainly going to get you an estimate. And in fact, there's some great resources that can be used to derive estimates of score based on just collection of those simple measurements, and we'll certainly link some of those in this video that you can see. But certainly it's a great time to celebrate when you've got a deer on the ground, and there may be a lot of work ahead if you process the deer yourself. But take the time to collect those harvest data measurements. You'll certainly see the enjoyment and see the progress of your management on your property over time if you do that. And hopefully you have some good luck this fall and can get out and collect some data.